Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first ever podcast by Indic Researchers Forum. Indic Researchers Forum is an independent, youth led think tank that researches on geopolitics, national security, culture, history, and social sciences through a civilizational perspective. The idea is to promote research and propagate the notion that the country has a civilizational heritage that is much larger and older than its recent history. Today, we will be talking about the future of AI governance in India. I am Sneha Kathy Sebastian, your host for this session. Currently, I'm a research associate for the forum. I extend a very warm welcome to Dr. Charu Malhotra and Commodore Naresh Chabra. We are delighted to have you in our midst today. Naresh sir is an alumnus of Naval Academy, Goa. He was commissioned in the Indian Navy on 1st July 1994. He is an electrical engineer with masters in electronics and telecommunications. He also holds an MBA with specialization in marketing and PGDBA in HR from the Indian Institute of Modern Management, Pune. Currently, he is pursuing his PhD in artificial intelligence in management. Commodore Naresh has served on board the Indian naval ships Sukanya, Ranvijay, and Trishul. He is also a recipient of Best All-Rounder Award at INS Valsura. Sir has authored several papers on varied topics which have been published in reputed journals. A very warm welcome to both our guests. We are delighted to have this conversation with you. Please note there will not be a Q&A session, so everyone please turn off your mics and keep your cameras on. I now pass on the mic to Commodore Naresh Chabra to introduce Dr. Charu Malhotra.
Thank you, Sneha, so much. First, for the lucid and detailed introductory for me. I'm glad that you have brought in the first of the podcast on the subject of artificial intelligence. Before I introduce to you Dr. Charu Malhotra, the eminent academician with us, I'm sure all of us in the audience today would know the journey of this artificial intelligence. It started with what we had in those days, Turing machines and Turing test, introduced by Alan Turing, which was later on coined with the new term as artificial intelligence by McCarthy. A subject which integrate the Industry 4.0 technologies such as Internet of Things, cloud, machine learning, robotics, etc. This amalgamation of so many technologies have gained prominence over the last few years in spite of it having many winters. This subject of artificial intelligence has a vast potential not only to unlock the economic value but also to mitigate the social challenges. When I talk about the economic value and social challenges of artificial intelligence, I'm sure there could not have been a better person than Dr. Charu Malhotra who could talk about social aspects of artificial intelligence. She is a researcher, a trainer, and a consultant with more than 30 years of national and international experience. As a researcher, she has a research under her fold on the concept of design thinking concept. As a trainer, she has guided more than 25 MPhils and PhDs in varied topics. And she has a lot of projects, on the consultancy basis and maybe worth more than 150 million rupees. All this and much more to it is that Dr. Charu is an associate professor at Indian Institute of Public Administration. She is a coordinator for Center of E-Governance. She is instrument to get destructive technologies into the government systems by being part of various committees. She's probably, I won't be wrong if I say that she's immersed in technologies more than maybe the immersive technologies themselves. And if I talk about the awards, the list is endless. She's been the lead India Power Woman Award holder for 2021. I would not go into the details of all the list of the awards, but I would definitely would like to say when in the pandemic time, that is the last year, when everybody was going under the lockdown, it was she who ran a digital program of advanced public administration at Indian Institute of Public Administration. What more? I can go on, ladies and gentlemen. I can go on introducing this eminent professor, but let me first welcome her, and on behalf of the complete audience here, and also thank Indic Forum to give us this opportunity to talk on technology adoption and governance of artificial intelligence. Ma'am, a very warm welcome to you. And ladies and gentlemen, I would also mention to you that I'm the proud student of ma'am. So I can say that she presents the technology in a very, very simple and lucid manner. Complex technologies like artificial intelligence, cloud, IoT, and the list is endless. Ma'am, how do you get to make things so simple? How do you get so much of confidence? How do you get learning and affection into the system? Ma'am, I would be really grateful if you bring in some background details. What makes you do things in such a simplistic manner with your humble journey from your home to this stage of a professor, a teacher, a mentor, and a guide? I would really invite you to say something about your background, please, ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Namaskar, each of you, and good evening, everybody else who's outside this country and as well as within the country. First and foremost, thanks to you, Commodore Naresh, for all this generous introduction as well as the choice of words to talk about me. I'm really humbled. But before that, I must thank Indic Researchers Forum. This is what India needs, a vibrant young forum of officers, I would say, in making, of young people like Yasir, Sneha, Monya, and all of you. So thanks each of you for inviting us to this forum and provoking us to speak extempore about certain things. I would also like to wish everybody in the organization which I represent, that is Indian Institute of Public Administration, and some of my colleagues that I can already see are online. So a warm welcome to each of you. Nareshji, your question about the background. Well, though it is a very personal question, however, I think I would just sum up this journey by saying that I was a teacher by birth, because I don't remember holding toys or dolls when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, but I do remember writing with chalk on whiteboard, blackboard at that time, that my mother had bought me on my special request on my 6th or 7th birthday. I always wanted to be a teacher, and I was the most laggard student ever. Though I was almost a gold medalist throughout my life till my PhD. But it would take me time to understand concepts that were alien to me, like operational research or some other aspects. So at that point of time, I made a commitment to myself that if I teach, which I knew I would eventually, I would teach to the advantage of the slowest student of the class in that subject. And I think that hypothesis had stood by me till now, that I don't teach for benefit of those who know a lot, but I would love to communicate about my subject, which is no longer an alien word to any of us, digital technologies, in a manner that the slowest and the senior most citizen in my class is most comfortable. That's all I have to say. Thank you. Nareshji, I can't hear you. Unmute yourself, please.
Sorry for that, ma'am. What I was saying is, with that humble background, with your upbringing, which made you a teacher, but what surprises me is that you had the computer applications masters, then your PhD at IIT Delhi. Ma'am, you could have been well a businesswoman. And if I may say that you've got so much projects under your fold, I mean, you could venture out in any, you could have ventured out in any field. But what is that? What motivated you to become a teacher, a professor, and get into this world of academia? And I'm also sure that there must have been some challenges during the education stage while being into profession. And so my question to you would be that what went on to make this worthy academician out of you, ma'am? If you can throw some light on that aspect.
Nareshi, thanks for this very non-AI question and very personal. However, I can't afford to chicken out at this time in this forum. So I'll be very honest. What lures me to academia is the constant strive of learning, researching, and enhancing education or knowledge, if I could say. Education to ab nahi ho sakta. So enhancing knowledge is what keeps me awake happily throughout the night, and I don't even realize morning has set in, because our subject has so much to offer. I don't think so as a businesswoman I would have enjoyed so much. I don't believe in monetization of knowledge at all. So that is one thing. And money has never attracted me. And being a spiritual person, also from a middle class, background, I personally feel it is giving back to society if I could do some kind of capacity building endeavor. So you can see a part of internal reasons and a part of spiritual reasons that I love my subject. Now, second, struggles and challenges. The spaces I come from are very comfortable. I belong to a family, a middle class family, where my mother was actually a royal woman. She was daughter of a great Maharaja from UP. However, my father has been a very grounded person, an engineer, and education was the mainstay of our family. But the only struggle I ever felt was in college, because I have been throughout educated in non-medical field, being an engineer by spirit. I've gone to Thapar Engineering College, Regional Engineering College, Kurukshetra, and then IIT for that matter, where women is like in very little numbers. So the struggle of proving our mettle as a woman was something, when I look back, was the most painful one. The energy required to outperform just because of your gender, not because you were expected to, is something which I'm sure all women in our subject, in our academia, in all everywhere else are confronted. There is no gender bias, but as of now, to prove a point that we can be good mothers as well as good professionals is still what I would say a double pressure on us. Yes, it was a struggle. It was a struggle. I remember, Naresh, there was a time when I was asked by one of my bosses to come and work on Saturday when I had just started my family life. And I came once and twice. The third time he asked me again. I said, sir, I cannot come. He said, look, you are starting this new program. Had I been at your place, I would have come at your age. So what do you want from me to come tomorrow on a Saturday to office? I just answered him very innocently, sir, I need a wife to come tomorrow. And when it hit him, he realized and he said, yes, I understand what you're saying. I won't elaborate beyond that. Thank you. Nareshji, please unmute yourself.
What I was saying, ma'am, thank you for giving so personal details. And I'm sure this is going to motivate a lot of young women around, because where there is a will, there is a way. That is what you're proving. And now, after giving us these details, let me take you to the journey of those 30 years plus, ma'am. I'm taking you to little more than, I'm stretching you a little more, because artificial intelligence, let's get into that subject of artificial intelligence, has been there for the last 60 years or maybe probably more. And we all know and that artificial intelligence came in and it had its winters setting in. There was a status of hiatus in between. But the things today are very exciting than they were thus so far. So I will really jump into the question, ma'am, that will artificial intelligence is something of a substance. I hope it's not a hype, and it will do the same work for countries like China, USA, India, what industrialization did for Britain and the Europe per se is that. So is AI here to disrupt our society? That's the question I would start with on the subject of artificial intelligence. Ma'am, if you can please elaborate.
Thank you, Nareshi. First and foremost, before I answer your second part, that is it a disruptive force in true sense of word, or is it a hype phenomena? I would first like to thank you for being such a thorough professional in asking me this question and making a comment that it is not now that this subject has, been incubated or conceived or popularized. I'm glad you have reminded our audience that AI is not a new phenomena. If I look back, I think it was way back in 1915s when we read that the first AI program was run by US to emulate IBM 701. And I also recall it was way back in 1985 that I did my first internship project on AI when I was studying in Computer Center Department of Kurukshetra University. I remember the first internship project I got was to design algorithms for breadth first search, BFS search, and DFS, depth first search. And I had employed queue data structures and stack data structures to explore the best possible ways. So AI is not a new phenomena, but however, it is of late that AI has become so important because of the huge advancements in computers when we have AI machines mimicking human vision, language processing, and we can see them making a direct impact on fintech, medical, e-governance, agri-tech space, and so on. I'm sure you would be aware of all those machine learning algorithms that are available in with banks and apps, where this machine learning algorithm determines not just your eligibility but your preferences, your risk taking ability, and they give you better information for your own future planning. I particularly would hail Government of India for its efforts in agriculture. To a large extent, AI technology in agriculture, has led to so many advents that it is really worthy of getting up and noticing them. Of late, during COVID, I would take my dear audience to the time where a WhatsApp chatbot has been launched on MyGov Corona Help Desk that can help users to check symptoms, get a diagnosis, provide tips and precautionary measures to stay safe. And it shares so much information that it is indeed the most important service we could have done to Indians through the support of AI. When I have to do a little bit of crystal gazing, I can also see AI being employed in various missions of Government of India, like Swachh Bharat Mission. You might ask me, how would Clean India Initiative or Swachh Bharat Mission be supported by AI? Because we know Swachh Bharat Mission is all about physical monitoring of the scheme, where money has to be pumped in after supervision of construction of toilets, etc., at various stages of construction. So if I would use sensors at these sites through prudent application of AI and deep learning algorithms, it is possible to process each and every photograph in a very cost-effective manner that would lead to better monitoring of the scheme and huge decline in the malpractices related to it. Nareshi, this is just one example. I would like to remind to each of you that Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology had hosted a global artificial intelligence summit called as RAISE, RAISC, which was actually titled the way your question is titled to me, the Responsible AI for Social Empowerment. So the acronym for that is RAISE, which was a virtual summit and which really gave us a wonderful idea of how AI is useful in social context. Second part of your question, you brought in names like countries like China and US. I would just want the audience to hold their breath. I won't give you the real numbers, you can always figure them out, but I'll just ignite you to by saying that countries like China, their upper bound estimate expenditure in the year 2018 in AI was almost equal to the total United States estimated expenditure in AI of 2020. And these are two leading, countries, as you yourself said, in AI. So imagine what China has in its folds. It's far ahead of its competitor, and it's definitely far ahead of us in terms of its budget expenditure on AI. And dear audience, this budget expenditure of China, when I'm saying, is only for non-defense. Okay, when I talk of US calculation of defense plus non-defense is almost equal to China of 2018 non-defense AI expenditure. So these countries have an edge over others. However, India also recognizes AI as a force multiplier, and several organizations have been asked to develop their strategies for AI adoption. And the proof of that, if anybody wants to see this forum, is just the start for you. There is a portal called as India AI Portal, which is a joint initiative of Ministry of Electronics and IT and National Association Software of Service Company and National E-Governance Division, NEGD as we call it as. And this portal will become a fountainhead of trusted content on AI initiatives for each of you in India. You know, you would realize what India is doing. And if you would just look at the political leadership vision also, even our Honorable Prime Minister had, announced in several forums, and he is already bringing academia as well as industry together to develop a roadmap of robotics, drones, online education technologies through AI. And I'm sure if that leadership announcement has come, we are very much in the process and the right way. So this is just the tip of iceberg. We have an era to wait and watch. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think you have covered almost all the applications of AI, whether from fintech to the health sector, to space, to defense, and everything you mentioned about. And you very rightly said that US and China aspect. So actually, in a way, you are confirming to what Warren Buffett said when he said that AI is here to disrupt. So I think I'm very, very sure about it. So it is indeed here to disrupt our society. It is going to affect we as humans, the society, and the economy. Ma'am, when we have taken our audience through the journey of the applications of AI and the terms of disruptive technology, you've given the potential which exists. To some extent, we have taken the baby steps towards it. We need to go further beyond it and the probable applications which we have to go. Before we dwell more on these aspects, if you can throw some light and make our audience understand as to what are the building blocks of AI, because there are various definitions floating around in the market today, and people understand in different ways. So if you can make our audience in a very simple way as to what can be categorization of AI and what do actually they make and mean to a common layman who can understand these applications and correlate. So if you can tell us about the building blocks of AI, ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Nareshji. Don't expect me to take a class, but anyway, if you've asked me, I won't go into the building blocks per se, but I would just like the audience to know that the AI which I just mentioned, or the AI that you hear about when you are using e-commerce applications, when you are working on OTT, when you are watching movies on OTT and you get your choices, is just the weakest application of AI. So for a layman, if I can say, AI is simulation of human intelligence by machines. And this simulation of human intelligence could be for all the sensory abilities we have, to see, to hear, to talk, etc. However, AI per se can be classified in three categories. One is weak or narrow AI. So weak or narrow AI is then, succeeded by strong or deep AI. It is just opposite, weak ka ulta strong and narrow ka ulta deep. And last but not the least, we have artificial general intelligence, AGI. Okay, so there are three different gradients of AI, if I can say, weak or narrow, strong or deep, and AGI. So weak is when it is when the application of AI is expected to imitate human intelligence or behavior for a specific context or for a limited context, or in a manner in which expert of only that field would behave like. So if I'm a expert driver, so autonomous vehicles would drive as smartly as me as an expert would, but they would not cook for me, they would not talk to me, they would not they would not know what is in my mind. Okay, so it's precisely driverless vehicle kind of application, or IBM Watson you would have heard, or Siri, or whatever. But the different products are there. I won't even go into that. So these are context-based applications of narrow nature, one subject nature. However, presume this platter of application horizontally being expanded to mimic human intelligence and behavior, the way a human would behave in all situations, and not just being a good driver, but also being a good cook and a good professor and probably a good homemaker. So if this one application is able to sing good morning to me and can turn on my tea kettle in the morning, can help me to prepare for my session, is actually my alter ego. It's like my digital twin, if I can use that word, and is behaving every time I'm behaving in a particular situation. So that's a strong AI. If I've confused some of my audience members, please see this movie called as Her, H-E-R, to understand the potential and possibilities of strong AI. Okay, then we come to the last category, AGI. AGI, as I said, stands for Artificial General Intelligence. So AGI machines are machines that are yet to be developed, thankfully for that. And they can think beyond us. They are superhumans and super machines amalgamated together. I would elaborate beyond that, but I would just say, please read some of very good fiction books which I'm fond of, like Dan Brown's Origin is there. Please try to read that to understand what AGI is. You would love the character there of Watson again. Or probably read Michael Crichton's Prey, Prey, and you would understand how the swarm of interconnected biotechnology-based AI can damage our existence if not controlled. So that is AGI. That's all I have to say.
Ma'am, I'm sure after this, everybody's rushing to watch that Her, and the number of books you have given, I think they have got a task in hand. But we have a task in hand, because for AI to work, it is data. Without data, there is no AI. Data is the backbone, and I don't think that country like India, we have the right infrastructure as of now. Though we are very well off, we are very good. We have taken some concrete steps towards data sovereignty and safety and all those aspects. But definitely data at times get jeopardized by inadequate supporting infrastructure. Of late, we have had some instances of data being compromised, be it from the aviation sector or be it from the hospitality sector. At times, there have been reports to those effects. So there is definitely a need to source and maintain the infrastructural requirements of data centers. And I know that you've been working with METI and you are related with the data aspect of it. Can you take us through the journey of data handling in Indian context? How is India planning to meet the infrastructural requirement of setting up and maintaining data centers, data localization, all those big words which come in? I will not pop you further. You can take the lead and can please answer that from the Indian context as to what is the data future for us.
Are you asking me a direct question on data sovereignty, cloud computing, and data localization?
Absolutely, ma'am.
Okay. But before I go into that, I can see in audience there are some, some learners also. So you rightly said, first and foremost thing for us to understand in AI is that AI, as you said, I say it in a different manner. I say AI is data guzzler. It thrives on data. It munches, it chops, it processes, it then ruminates only because of data. I mean, the strength of AI is data to a large extent, okay? And it is only because of data at the back end that we are able to build and deploy learning systems which are effective. Because all the learning processes, they draw their relationships or co-relationships or information for rule writing from data which is coming to them from diverse sources, diverse formats, or diverse processes. So all this data, imagine the kind of data we are talking about, the velocity, the veracity, the variety. I mean, it is humongous. And this data needs to be captured, to be stored, both in the latent form, in the passive form, as well as in the active form. So what we need is not just data capturing mechanisms, but data storage mechanisms, data processing mechanisms, for which infrastructure should be not just huge, but safe also, and ethical also. So imagine so much of data about Indian citizens, for example. How could I afford to siphon it out to borders outside my country? Okay, that is why I directly asked you, are you trying to ask me about data localization? Because data localization is the concept that the data must stay within the geographic boundaries of the country, and we need to have policy measures to that effect, so that data flow is restricted and the physical storage and processing is within the physical jurisdiction of our country. Okay, and for that we need several countries to come together to formulate such global policies that how to share data when it is localized in country. And quite often this concept is intermingled with, which is partially right but partially wrong also, with the concept of data sovereignty. Okay, sovereignty, like much of us know, is a concept which is about how do I ensure that the laws and structures of the government are applicable to our data. So data sovereignty are all the efforts of government to prevent citizens' data from falling into the wrong hands. Okay, the country's borders and country's information, personal information of the citizens should not cross country borders without permission. So it's closely linked with data security, cloud computing, and technological sovereignty also. So they are two interrelated and yet different concepts, and India has done a lot on that. First and foremost, I think you would know that our own country has Meghraj, which is a public cloud, which is doing the job of providing all the services to our citizens. It's the most trusted infrastructure we have, and it's no longer working in isolation. Meghraj has already done handshake to impanel various cloud service providers to provide our country with state-of-art cloud service offerings. So, and Meghraj also gives you DigiLocker. All of you know, being students, if some of you are students here. So, cloud infrastructure of our country is the first and foremost concern of Ministry and Government of India. And not just that, Nareshji, you would know better than me. India is also making a lot of progress on AI in defense. I mean, AI ushered advancements in defense have opened up and have augmented our military capabilities so much that we are really proud of it. I would not say beyond that. I think I've taken my time. Thank you.
Definitely, ma'am. We should leave defense a little. Notwithstanding, first of all, thank you so much for taking us to this journey of data, localization, sovereignty, all those aspects. And we are proud to have our Meghraj with us. And you did mention about responsible AI, and you did mention about the regulations. If we talk about that, and I'm taking you toward the governance of AI. In 2018, NITI Aayog released the National Strategy for Artificial Intelligence and made recommendations, suggestions for supporting and nurturing for AI ecosystem in India. It was the first document which laid down the guidelines for development a responsible AI. And very recently, NITI Aayog has again uploaded a paper in two parts. First was one done in February 2021, and a second one has been done in August, which was again pertaining to responsible AI and AI for all. The paper lays down the principles for responsible AI, which are derived from the Constitution of India and various laws which have been enacted thereafter. It aims to start a dialogue. Now, what needs today is that everybody starts talking, because the trust has to be built in. because there is a potential. That potential has to be transformative, because it has to be utilized for the benefit of the common Indian citizen and humanity overall. Keeping all these aspects in view, ma'am, I would like you to tell our audience that is this document the all, or is there something more which is required for the growth of responsible AI? If you can share your views on this context, responsible of AI, the Niti Aayog dialogue, the 2018 policy, and all those things keeping in view, if you can throw your light on the subject, please, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm glad you have finally brought out the regulatory aspect, because that's the most important for any country to incubate innovation. And you are so right that India has taken a step forward. Let me first remind you that the Niti Aayog paper of 2018, if you recall, had emanated after a lot of insights, feedback, and experiences, which had been consolidated through interministerial consultations. There were large scale global multi-stakeholder consultations. There were series of one-on-one consultations with academia, with AI experts in India and elsewhere also. So that is how the roadmap of AI ecosystem of a country had been proposed. And what is rightly said by you is that we need to include AI in our industrial policy also, because eventually everything would be IoT, everything would have sensors, everything would have technology component of AI remnants. So we need to encourage adoption of AI in a very responsible manner in our country, so that citizens of our country, our country is so diverse for various reasons: demographic, economic, social, cultural. So each and every citizen should have trust on technology, especially AI technology. And AI for all, the main focus had been that we use AI in responsible and safe and ethical manner. Now, what is to be done beyond this document? I remember I wrote a paper on AI and ethics. That was long ago, somewhere at the same time, 2018, and presented it to ITU in Argentina, which got the best paper award, where it was co-authored with some other speakers also. I remember Ms. Vinod Kotwal from Department of Telecommunication was my author in that. So our paper, we gave a very, what I would say, we broke the glass ceiling, and we gave that it is high time programmers focus on emotional quotient as well as spiritual quotient while designing AI programs. So the need for ethical algorithms in the domain of machine learning and to resolve ethical dilemmas is the need of the hour. And because we come from a wonderful country like India, which bring with us a lot of ethical heritage, when I presented it in a technical forum and talked about how India can contribute in building up ethical, machines that are trustworthy, that are free of human prejudice, and that they are capable of cleaning the bias far more sensitive than any other mechanism would. It was listened to and heard and applauded. So I personally feel that ethics master algorithms are the need of the hour, which are possible only when we are able to combine IQ with EQ, that is intelligent quotient, with emotional quotient, and then with spiritual quotient, for which we definitely need a consortium of experts. Thanks a lot.
Ma'am, I like the idea of yours going from IQ to EQ to SQ. And I fully agree with you. I mean, there is no debate that we need to have AI in a very, very responsible, safe, and ethical manner. So if we have to do so, if we compare with what we were about 30 years or so again, when the biotechnology was coming in, we were in the same state. We were discussing that ethics issue even when biotechnology was being talked about. And same is AI at where we are. So AI is showing enormous potential, ability to alter the human face of development. Do you think that, I feel that there is a need to have a massive drive which need to make people aware so that they have undistorted information about the potential, the good use of AI, which can also help the policy makers to make informed decisions, as it was done in the case of biotechnology when it was coming in. So do you think that the time is right for a well thought out action plan for AI to work better and to ensure that it helps make our lives better? What is your opinion about it?
Okay, you won't let me take a breath also. Anyway, but I love your flurry of questions. Yes, I totally agree with you that the comparison of evolution process of AI with biotechnology is very apt, perfect. However, I would petrify you further, you and the audience further. You know, with the threat of an artificial arms race looming large on the future of humankind on this earth, there is an urgent requirement to speed up the process of introducing proper action plans, ethical intelligence algorithms, and more focus on cybersecurity and data privacy concerns, which we've already talked about. But let me remind each of you that these concerns will get more complicated with increasing autonomy in machine learning. So to ensure that the earth stays as beautiful it is, so that to ensure that the natural life on earth is retained, we must design algorithms for machines that are more aware about harmony, empathy, conservation of resources, etc., etc. And this is not possible till we don't eliminate the existing biasness in our data sets, and till we do not create data sets that are clean and unbiased. So it's a two-pronged approach. We need to regulate all the biasness that has come into the existing AI databases, and then ensure that the new databases that we create are able to resolve trolley dilemmas. Okay, you can read about trolley dilemma later. And for that, we need to have an action plan. For that, we need to have much beyond approach document. And I don't deny the fact that maybe we need an AI Act before it is too late in our country. Because AI Act will subsume Cloud Act, data sovereignty, data localization, data privacy, cybersecurity, everything in it. It's going to be mother of all acts. That's all I have to say.
Ma'am, I think your futuristic thought to have an AI Act is, I think, the need of the hour. I mean, I couldn't say more on that. You've already brought in the factor of responsible AI. You have introduced the concept of narrow AI. I would not be wrong to say that we are still at the stage of narrow AI. When we look at the applicability, ma'am, you've already mentioned a few of them. May I request you to give some few more examples? I know that I'm stretching you too far, but give some examples of narrow AI for the purpose of the common good of a common citizen. I mean, from that angle, how AI can be beneficial, if you can just give few more examples before we take on the ill effects or something on that further.
The examples are numerous. I mean, anywhere you want a predictive decision-making approach where data is humongous, where you need to have foresight to resolve a dilemma. For example, we want to work on aspirational districts. I mean, you would have heard about aspirational districts from Niti Aayog. And we want to focus resources in a collaborative and competitive manner between villages to share their growth parameters or to share the resources. AI would do this in a jiffy and give it to us on the dashboard, who needs what at what point of time, without much of what I would say vagueness. And I do recall in Maharashtra, there is one particular Chhatarpur or some district who have developed village plans using AI. They have culminated all the data of citizens, put it together on a dashboard, and all the scheme disbursement financial grants are going through that kind of approach. So the potential is limitless, and this one session is not going to be enough. But I would only say that wherever human capacities fail, AI will come to our rescue in good way.
I agree. Your point, you made it that one session AI is too complex a subject to be discussed. But notwithstanding, ma'am, thank you so much for giving us all those examples and its use in e-governance and fields other way. I know that I have stretched enough, but let me talk about you know, every technology when it comes in, people look at the ill effects of that technology and that's what makes them to be little apprehensive of whether we should go for it or we should not go for it. And one of the things which is being talked about AI is the unemployment. You know, it's the talk of the town that somehow this AI, artificial intelligence, the robotics are going to take away our jobs from us. But is that a reality? Is that so? Is there a danger of AI-induced mass unemployment in a hugely populated country like us? What do you think the new shape of employment would be in times to come? What will be the skill set which will be required? I'm sure with your experience of handling the students, I mean, so many years behind you as a teacher, you would have to, even teachers would have to change. So what are your views on the new skill set? And through this question, ma'am, basically I'm asking you to give a message to our young generation across as to what we need to change in times to come so that AI comes in and we still remain relevant and we don't have those ill effects as people deem it to be, and that trust is built in the technology, ma'am. If you can please.
I think the answer to this question lies in your own reference. Initially, when you had started this podcast, you asked me if industrialization and AI could be compared in any manner. So remember, in those days, there was a threat of job loss to laborers when factories were getting set up. So almost similar, in the similar manner, AI is believed to take up a lot of jobs, but they completely forget to mention what kind of jobs would be lost. Okay. Personally, I feel humans can never be replaced by machine, even if they become, super machines, or even if they have all kinds of AGIs and ASIs in them. However, it's very important for me to remind the young generation by quoting, I just read it today. If you open up today's Mint, you would find this quotation. Permit me a lapse if I'm not remembering it correctly, but it somehow answered your question. It says, AI is as good at describing the world as it is today with all its biases, but it does not know how the world should be in future. So what I'm trying to say, that machines will keep having their limitations, but they would often lack the foresight or the creativity or the acumen to do creative jobs, to do visionary thinking, to do, some kind of, if I could say, leadership skills, soft skills, all the soft skills. How do you expect machines to emulate those? There is so much of data in Europe which is lying in public domain, which clearly points out that the kind of jobs that would be lost to AI are those, bottom of the pyramid jobs, if I can use this word. The jobs that are routine in nature, that are mundane in nature, that are non-creative, that do not require much creative thinking. Okay, so those kinds of jobs definitely are in for a loss. However, jobs, emerging professions where we are looking at, some kind of creativity or some kind of empathy or some kind of visionary skills, content production, etc., can never be lost, even if we have bots that can talk or bots that can write poetry. But let me reassure you, it is up to us to perform and transform ourselves depending on the need of the hour and as per changing times, that human beings can do faster, but machines can't. So rest assured, if you are creative, if you are updated, if you have empathy, if you are a good leader, your job can never be taken up by a robot.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for reassuring that our jobs are intact and we are safe in hands, and artificial intelligence can be used very, very beautifully. So, ma'am, as I can look at the watch too, I think we have made our day, and every good thing has to come an end, and so this talk is no different. And I am extremely grateful to you for having answered all the questions in such a lucid manner, in your typical manner, because I know you very personally. So questions related to adoption of technology, AI technology, the need of governance in the field of AI, the need of regulations to have to leverage the AI potential to not only reform but to perform as well as to transform. It was indeed a pleasure. It was a delight to have a great academician like you with us, who dreams, who plans and formulates the roadmap, the policies which can be implemented on work. Thank you so much, ma'am. And I'm sure that these inputs would give inputs to the various other agencies for AI adoption and governance. It was indeed fascinating to have discussion on such a relevant and a current topic. And I'm sure the audience would have gained a lot from this discussion. And I thank Indic Research Forum for having given you and me both this opportunity to, and especially to me, to share this dice with you, ma'am. Thank you so much, and hand over back to Indic.
Thanks again.
That was a wonderful conversation, and I can't thank Dr. Charu and Commodore Naresh enough for enlightening us about the future of AI governance in India. Some things that really stood out to me during the conversation was when ma'am talked about concepts like the 3 gradients of AI or data sovereignty, and also the rules and policies for the development of AI in India. This conversation will really help all of us look into the future to see how AI can really aid and disrupt human life. Personally, I was extremely amused when ma'am called AI a human's digital twin because I've always wanted a twin who would do everything for me. On behalf of Indic Researchers Forum, I would like to extend our warm regards to Dr. Charu Malhotra and Commodore Naresh Chabra. We thank you for your valuable time and valuable insights. With this, we come to the end of the session. Thank you to everyone who attended the session. I now hope that all of you may be a little more well aware and informed about AI and its future in our country. Jai Hind.
Thank you, and Jai Hind.
Thank you and Jai Hind.